Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle And in this video, we're taking a look at Go Collect's hottest trending comics for the week of October 22nd. Now, for those who don't know, Go Collect puts out weekly articles that switch between hottest comics and trending comics. This week, we got trending comics, which is a more curated list of books that are really starting to get liquid out there in the market. But before I get into the list, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, do one of those things, I'd appreciate it. But let's get into this video here today. Now, of course, I will put a link in the description. This article is always written by Matt Tuck. If you guys want to do your own reading, you can do that, but I will break down the list for you like I always do week to week. And coming in at the number 5 spot is a book that is very cool to talk about. This one right here is Marvel Spotlight number 2, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 100th slot, just squeezing in there. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1972, written by Roy Thomas, that would feature the first appearance of Werewolf by Night. Now, as I'm sure you guys all know, we recently got the Werewolf by Night Halloween special, which featured the Jack Russell version of the character. And generally speaking, I feel like the sentiment, at least amongst the comic book collectors, was very, very favorable to that show overall. It seems like Disney was able to kind of really focus in on this kind of one-shot TV show, so to speak. And it looks like this is going to be a successful sort of formula that Disney is going to be looking to pursue later on down the line with other characters. And what is really encouraging and interesting about analyzing that show and its effect on the market is it does in fact seem like a lot of the books related to the show, we're talking about the Man-Thing books, we're talking about the Elsa Bloodstone books, and then of course we're talking about Marvel Spotlight number 2 right here. A lot of those books actually performed very well in correlation to the show, which has not been the case for a lot of the other shows like She-Hulk, so to speak, or for Thor Love and Thunder. A lot of the books related to those properties have been going down in value by quite a bit, especially in this current economy. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the feeling around those properties was generally pretty negative overall. And this kind of goes to show that, if Marvel continues to put out good shows, good properties, and this is also the case of DC, as long as the content is good, it does still feel like to some degree that will have an effect on the values of the books and how they perform throughout the course of the show's lifespan or the movies or whatever the case may be. And that's one of the reasons why we have Marvel Spotlight number 2 on the list. Now, that's not to say that this book is setting all new record highs. It's going to be really difficult for a lot of books to ever touch their 2021 peak prices, but it did definitely create a dead cat bounce for Marvel Spotlight number 2, and that is why it is the 5th hottest selling comic of the week. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. There's actually one 9.8 on the census, hasn't been a sale in quite some time, so not really worth talking about. 9.6s have 23. Fair market value is 12,000. 90-day moving is 12,000. So we did get one sale this year at the $12,000 price point, which is definitely really interesting. If we go down here to the 9.0 range, we can see 134 on the census. Fair market value is 1,100. The 1 year was 1,500. 30-day moving is 1,075. So, like a lot of the books in the market, of course, this one has definitely had its peak in 2021 and then had its corrected price. But, there was an influx of sales overall in the market due to the success of the show. And we did see it move quite a bit. I think the 8.5 grade here will kind of show you the life cycle for this particular book. You can see that, like a lot of books, shot up in 2021, had its big correction, and then all throughout the course of March of 2022 had a little bit of a bounce up and then was sliding down once again. And here we are on the tail end of kind of September, October, coming off the heels of the show, and it had a little bit of a bounce back up due to the success of the property overall. And I think that that's very, very encouraging if you're somebody out there who has books related to the MCU and you want to see them do well. I mean, it does feel like if the properties are successful, if the fans like it, then the book's values can definitely hold their floor. And then of course down here at the bottom, not going to always see it slabbed here at the low grade, but when you go into eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, 1972 book, it's still going to set you back around that $250 to $300, maybe $400 range or so. All right, let's move on now to the 4th hottest comic of the week. And the 4th hottest comic of the week is one that makes me smile, one that brings me a lot of member berries, a cover that I think is one of the great covers of the Copper Age. But this one right here is Uncanny X-Men number 268, new to the list this week, now sitting in the 87th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1990, written by Chris Claremont, that would feature the iconic Jim Lee cover. Now, what is the significance of this book? Well, of course, there are a few things. Like I already set up, this is an iconic Jim Lee cover. If you grew up collecting in the 90s, you definitely remember this one. Just great classic Jim Lee art. But number 2, this is the kind of first time that Captain America, Black Widow, and Wolverine were sort of recognized as being, characters that knew each other in World War II. And this would actually be sort of the origin of how Logan and Steve Rogers actually had met during the course of World War II. And that makes this book pretty exciting and pretty interesting overall. I mean, when I start to think about books like this and think about the future of the MCU, some of the books that still perform very, very well in the comic book spec market, on top of first appearances and solo titles, are actually first meetups. It does feel like collectors really do like to have their hands on books that kind of talk about first meetups. And when we think about characters like Steve Rogers and Black Widow and Wolverine, I feel like it's very, very possible that some point in the future, Kang Dynasty, Secret Wars, we're traveling through time, we're doing all that wibbly wobbly stuff. It's very likely that we could see a scene with all three of these characters in World War II. So I think that this is an interesting book that has some spec value, on top of the fact that it is just one that all collectors just like to have in their collection. It's just a great key, classic book, nostalgia all over it. And for that reason, it's the fourth hottest trending comic of the week. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. There's actually two 9.9s on the census. Would be interesting to see what those would sell for today. I think that could actually hit the 4-figure range. 9.8s have 516 on the census. Fair market value is 270. 30-day moving is 278. So, kind of like a lot of books out there in the market, has a very similar graph to what we saw where there was hitting peak prices on the $450 range. It'll be very difficult for a book like this to really reach those prices once again, simply due to the fact that, it's kind of a minor key, not necessarily a major key. I suppose if we do have this kind of team up at some point in the future, this book will definitely go off. But, if you're somebody out there who just enjoys this thing, last couple sales, you can find it for, $225, slash price $300. Not too bad an entry point overall if you're just somebody who, has the nostalgia for this thing. And then of course, 1990 book down here at the bottom. I'm not going to see it slabbed at the low grade, but when you go into eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, this is a book that typically sells around that $15, $20, $25 range. All right, let's go on now to the third hottest trending comic of the week. And the third hottest trending comic of the week is actually a very interesting one to talk about. This book right here is Free Comic Book Day, Avengers X-Men Eternals Judgment Day #1. New to the list this week, now sitting in the 76th slot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 2022, written by Kieran Gillen, that would feature the first appearance of Bloodline, otherwise known as Brielle, the daughter of Blade. Now, this book is very interesting to talk about as it relates to many different factors with regards to Marvel and the MCU. Of course, this is the first appearance of the daughter of Blade. We all know that we were supposed to be getting a Blade film that, is having its own sort of production nightmares. It looks like that movie is going to get pushed out, but there were some leaks and some rumors that there was somebody cast as sort of a young character, and a lot of people were speculating that this might be, a casting of Blade's daughter. It does feel like a lot of the Marvel properties have been looking to kind of set up the next generation, the young generation. And a lot of people were thinking that, it wasn't a coincidence that here in 2022, when we're getting a free comic book day, promoting a new character because they're going to be bringing her in to the MCU. So a lot of people, were using their speculation minds. A lot of people were jumping on this book, the last couple weeks or so. And that's really one of the reasons why this book has been trending so much. It's really interesting with books like this, though, because it was a free comic book day. That there's a lot of collectors that go to, the stores on the free comic book days, and they just grab every single book that has first appearances in it. A lot of people, find these books as really easy books to kind of have that speculation on. So it's definitely one of those books that you got to exercise some patience, because you will definitely be able to find a copy for cheap. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. Obviously, 2022 book, got to focus on the 9.8 grades. 306 on the census. Fair market value is $90. 30-day moving kind of right in line, 96, almost pushing that $100 price point. You can actually see this is an interesting thing. When it originally came out, it was at the 90, and like a lot of things do, they correct sort of after the hype of it. But this book has been able to sort of bounce back up due to the recent news about Blade and everything that's going on here. One thing to remember, there's only 306 on the census, but those are only 306 people that actually wanted to send in their books. There's tons of raw copies out there. So if in fact we do see her come to the MCU, you're going to see an influx of inventory being sent in for grading. Then of course, 2022 book, not going to see it slabbed at the low grade, but when you go into eBay looking for raw copies, typically now you can find them being sold around that $10, $15, maybe $20 range or so. Definitely an interesting book, and we'll see what happens in the future. All right, let's move on now to the second hottest trending comic of the week. And the second hottest trending comic of the week is one that had been trending in previous weeks. I think we all know why. But this book right here is New Mutants 98, up 4 spots, now sitting in the number 6 slot, all the way up there at the top. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is a book written by Rob Liefeld that came out in 1991 and would feature the first appearance of the character known as Deadpool. Now, we all know that we got that very exciting tease by Ryan Reynolds introducing the fact that Hugh Jackman was going to be returning as the Wolverine character in Deadpool number 3. And it does feel like all roads are sort of leading to a very, very exciting film, a very, very exciting team up for these characters in the MCU. Of course, that meant that a lot of people were jumping on the New Mutants 98 bandwagon once again. And this is one of those books that, has had a major, major correction from where it was in 2021. I mean, all the books have had their corrections, but this one definitely has been hit really hard. Obviously, being a Copper Age book with a lot of copies out there, there's going to be a high census. There's always going to be people looking to sell their books, which is going to create a lot of downward pressure on the ceiling values for this thing. And right now I think that this is a book that is still trying to figure out its floor value. It had been correcting pretty steadily ever since 2021, but with this recent announcement, it kind of leveled off the floor for a time. But it's hard to say if that excitement is going to be able to last the next 2 or 3 years, however long it's actually going to take us to get to the next announcement with Deadpool, some kind of trailer, some kind of movie announcement. Maybe Deadpool will make a cameo in another film. You never really know with this thing, but still a great book to get your hands on. One that I think is a classic. I think Deadpool has cemented himself to be, an S-tier character for Marvel. I mean, when you think about the ongoing titles for current comic books right now, Deadpool is really one of the only kind of new characters, at least invented in the last, say, 30 years or so, that can actually command his own solo series where people actually regularly buy it, people actually regularly follow it, which is a testament to, the people who want to own his first appearance book. So that makes this book very, very special for that reason. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of those values here. There's actually one 10.0 on the census, pretty crazy. There's a few 9.9s, 12 to be exact. Last sale in 2017 was $11,700. Man, to think about what that would sell for today in 2022 market, or at least post 2021 market, could be a $40,000 book for sure. 9.8s have 3,907 on the census, so quite a lot overall. Fair market value is $1,550. You can see 30-day moving is $1,655, which is slightly above the 90-day moving. So you can definitely see that this book was going down, and then when we got this announcement, it definitely kind of held the floor, so to speak. But you can see from the graph as well, paints a very clear picture where we saw it majorly jump up in 2021, and then had its steep decline ever since then. Probably still above the trend line overall. Maybe there's still some room to come down on this book, but not too far off, I would suspect, of the trend line for where it was selling at the end of 2020, around that $1,000 price point. So interesting to think about where this book would go from here. And then, of course, 1991 book down at the bottom. You might see it slab the low grade from time to time, but generally speaking, you're not going to see too many 2.0s of it. So when you go into eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, you can now see them being sold around that $350 to $400 price point. All right, let's go on now to the hottest trending comic of the week. And the hottest trending comic of the week is one that has been trending, one that has been in everyone's newsfeed, one that you guys have seen time and time again over the course of these last couple weeks. But this one, of course, is Wolverine number 88 Deluxe Edition. New to the list, the Deluxe Edition, now sitting in the number 3 spot. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. We went from out of the list to the number 3 spot. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1994, written by Larry Hama, that would feature the first meeting of Deadpool and Wolverine. Well, I don't think I really need to explain myself much more. I already talked about why New Mutants 98 was hot, but of course, we got the tease of Deadpool and Wolverine being in Deadpool 3 together. This is their first meeting. People like to have those books with first meetings, like I was talking about with Uncanny X-Men number 268. So a lot of people like to have things like Deadpool and Wolverine meet up. It's interesting to think about this book. I don't know if we're at the ceiling now. I can't imagine that when we get much closer to the film that there's much more of a ceiling for this book to go. It feels like we're at sort of peak hype right now, but you never really know. It will be interesting to kind of keep our eyes on this book and where the values are. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s have 271 on the census. So, not too much over overall, but I have to assume that a lot more are being sent into CGC right now. Fair market value is 550. 30-day moving is 555, which is definitely above the 1-year moving at 456. And it does seem like of all of the books that are out there, the deluxe edition was the one that a lot of, the speculators and the collectors were really chasing versus the direct edition. Of course, 1994 book, not going to see it slabbed too often at the low grade, but when you go into eBay looking for raw copies of this thing, you can typically now see them being sold around that $75, $85, maybe $100 range or so, depending on the deal and depending on the grade that you can find for yourself. Anyways, that is all for this video. Those were Go Collect's trending comics for the week. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any of these books? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next one.